I still remember the smell of that morning, the faint scent of wet earth after a night of light rain. The air was cool, soft, and almost kind. I had just finished sweeping the front porch when I saw the small, folded note under my door. It wasn't unusual for neighbors to drop off letters or newspaper clippings for me, but this one felt different. The paper was creased like it had been handled in a hurry. On the front, written in shaky blue ink, were just 8 words. "Get out of here if you want to live." At first, I laughed. It sounded dramatic, like something from a movie. I thought maybe it was meant for someone else. But something inside me went still. I looked around, across the street, at the small house belonging to my neighbor, Mrs. Henson, a kind woman in her 70s, who often waved to me while hanging her laundry. Through her curtain, I could see her watching me, her face pale and worried. She didn't wave this time. That was the moment I knew. The note wasn't about danger in the world outside. It was about the danger inside my own home. My name is Margaret, though most people just call me Maggie. I'm 68 years old. I've lived in this little brick house for nearly 40 years. It was once filled with laughter, the smell of baked bread, and the sound of my son, Daniel, running through the hallways. My husband, Thomas, used to whistle in the mornings. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Then years passed. Thomas died suddenly one winter morning, a quiet heart attack, the kind that leaves you with a cup of cold coffee on the table and no chance to say goodbye. After that, the house grew silent, too silent. Daniel got married the following year. His wife, Rebecca, was polite in the beginning, kind eyes, a sweet smile. She said she loved helping around the house, and I was happy to welcome her. I thought, maybe this will bring life back into our home. But sometimes life doesn't return the way you expect it to. In the early days, everything seemed fine. We'd have dinners together, talk about work, laugh about small things. I would wake up early to cook breakfast for them before they left for their jobs. Then slowly, almost quietly, things began to shift. Rebecca started cooking separately. She began closing her door when she talked to Daniel. The laughter that used to fill the dining table disappeared, replaced by the sound of spoons hitting plates and the ticking of the wall clock. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I talked too much. I told myself, they're young. They need their space. But then one evening, I overheard something that changed everything. It was a cold night in December. The heater was making its usual humming sound. I was in my room, folding laundry, when I heard Rebecca's voice from the living room. Low, but sharp. "Daniel, we can't keep living like this. Your mother, she's everywhere. She listens to everything." There was a pause. My son's voice followed, softer, hesitant. "She's just lonely, Becky. You know how she is." Rebecca sighed, loud enough that even from my room I could feel her frustration. "Lonely? Daniel, I can't even make dinner without her asking what's in the pot. I'm tired. I want my own life." Silence. Then the sound of a plate being set down a little too hard. I stood there frozen, holding a towel in my hands. My heart felt heavy, like a stone sinking in water. I wanted to walk in and say, "I'm sorry." I wanted to tell her that I never meant to intrude, that I just wanted to feel like part of the family. But I didn't. I stayed silent, and that silence became the start of everything that followed. The next few months felt like walking on glass. If I spoke, I felt like I said too much. If I stayed quiet, I felt invisible. Rebecca stopped making small talk. My son became distant, kind, but cold. The kind of kindness that lives in duty, not love. One morning, I made them tea before they left for work. When I placed the cups on the table, Rebecca didn't even look up from her phone. She said, "You don't have to do that, Margaret. We can handle ourselves." Her voice wasn't cruel. It was just empty. I nodded. But inside, something broke. Days turned into weeks. I spent more time with my neighbor, Mrs. Henson. She would often call me over for tea. We talked about gardens, her grandchildren, and the little aches of old age. She once looked at me, a long, knowing look, and said softly, "Maggie, you don't look happy anymore." I tried to laugh it off. "Oh, I'm fine, just tired sometimes." But she wasn't fooled. Old women can see through the masks other women wear. That's when she started watching me more closely, checking in, making sure I was all right. And that's how, one morning, she saw something I didn't. Something that made her slip that note under my door. It was a Friday morning. Rebecca and Daniel had been arguing since dawn, whispers that turned into sharp voices echoing down the hallway. I sat on the edge of my bed, listening, my heart beating faster with every word. "You promised me, Daniel. You said we'd move out after your mother's birthday. It's been 6 months." "She's my mother, Becky. I can't just abandon her." "You already have. You're living 2 lives, one for her, one for me. I'm done being the second choice." Then came the sound of footsteps, a door slamming, and the unmistakable sound of a suitcase being dragged across the floor. I came out of my room quietly. Rebecca was at the door, her eyes red, her hand gripping the handle of the suitcase. Our eyes met for a moment. Neither of us spoke. Then she said coldly, "You know, Margaret, sometimes love dies because someone stays too long." And with that, she left. For the first time in years, the house was silent. Not the comfortable kind of silence, the hollow kind. Daniel sat on the couch, staring at nothing. I sat beside him, wanting to say something, anything. But what could I say? That I was sorry for being here? Sorry for being alive? So I just said softly, "She'll come back, dear." He didn't answer. And that night, he didn't come home. I waited all day, but he didn't return. His phone went unanswered. I told myself maybe he needed space. Maybe he was with Rebecca. But when the second night came, I began to worry. And that's when Mrs. Henson's note appeared. The one that said, "Get out of here if you want to live." At first, I didn't understand. But when I saw the police car parked quietly outside that evening, and when I learned what Daniel had done in his heartbreak, the world as I knew it ended. I looked up, surprised. "Of course, dear. Sit down." She didn't sit. "I know things haven't been easy between us. I've said things I shouldn't have, but I'm losing Daniel. He's not the same anymore." I waited, unsure what to say. He blames himself. He thinks he failed both of us, and I don't know how to fix it. I felt tears sting my eyes. Maybe he just needs time. Sometimes love takes the long road back. She nodded weakly, whispering, I hope so. Then she turned to leave, but before she reached the door, she stopped and said, I'm sorry, Margaret, for everything. When she left, I sat there, staring at the empty chair. For the first time, I felt something soften inside me. Maybe forgiveness begins not with an apology, but with understanding someone's pain. That night, I wrote a letter. Not to anyone in particular, just words on paper, like a confession. I don't know when our home stopped feeling like a home, I wrote. Maybe it was the day Thomas died. Maybe it was the day silence became easier than conversation. But I miss laughter. I miss warmth. I miss being seen. When I finished, I folded the letter and placed it in my drawer. Then I went to sleep, not knowing that by morning, everything would change again. It was early, maybe 5:30 a.m., when I heard a knock on my door, a frantic, desperate knock. I rushed to open it. It was Mrs. Henson, her hair untied, her hands trembling. Maggie, wake up! Come with me, please. What's wrong? Just come now. I didn't even stop to put on my shoes. I followed her outside. Across the street, I saw smoke. Faint at first, curling up from my kitchen window. Then stronger, darker, flames flickering behind the glass. My heart stopped. Oh my God! Daniel! Rebecca! We ran back, but the fire was spreading fast. Mrs. Henson held my arm tight. The fire department is on the way. Stay here. But I couldn't stay. My children were inside. I ran toward the front door, screaming their names. The heat hit me like a wall. Then, a voice behind me. Mom, stop! It was Daniel. He came running from the side of the house, coughing, covered in soot. Behind him, Rebecca stumbled out, crying, clutching her chest. They were safe. I fell to my knees, shaking. Daniel knelt beside me, holding me close. We're okay, Mom. We're okay. The firemen arrived minutes later. They said the fire had started from an old wire behind the refrigerator. But deep down, I knew. That fire had been burning long before the smoke ever showed. For days after, the house smelled like ashes and wet wood. The kitchen was destroyed, and so were most of my old photographs. But strangely, I didn't cry. Because that night, when I saw Daniel and Rebecca holding each other alive and trembling, I realized something. Sometimes destruction gives you a second chance to rebuild. We stayed with Mrs. Henson for a few weeks while repairs began. She was happy to have company again. She would make tea and tell old stories, and in those evenings, I began to feel human again. Rebecca helped clean and organize things every day. She laughed sometimes, a real laugh, not the forced kind I'd grown used to hearing. Daniel started talking again too, softer, gentler. One afternoon, as we were sorting out the salvaged boxes, Rebecca found my letter. "Is this yours?" she asked. I nodded, embarrassed. "It's nothing, just an old woman's thoughts." She unfolded it, read quietly, then looked up at me with tears in her eyes. You were never invisible, Margaret. I just didn't know how to share my space. I thought I was losing Daniel to the past. I didn't see how lonely you were." Her words cracked something open inside me. I took her hand and said, "And I didn't see how much you were trying to make your own life. I'm sorry too, dear." We hugged for the first time. It felt like years of silence melted away in that single moment. That night, as I sat outside with Mrs. Henson, she smiled and said, "See, Maggie, sometimes the fire doesn't come to destroy. It comes to light up what we've forgotten." I smiled softly. "Maybe that's what you meant in your note that day." She chuckled, sipping her tea. "Exactly. You had to get out, not of your house, but out of your pain." I looked up at the sky, the faint smell of smoke still lingering in the air, and whispered, "I think I finally understand." The morning sunlight came through the broken blinds, touching the edges of the half-burnt living room. The walls were still stained with smoke. Pieces of our life lay scattered, charred photographs, melted candle holders, the cracked clock that had once kept time for everything that mattered. I stood there in silence, holding one of the old frames. It was a picture of Thomas, my late husband, standing beside the garden he loved so much. His face still had that same patient smile, the one that always told me everything will be all right. For the first time in a long while, I whispered aloud, "Thomas, maybe you were right. Maybe endings aren't meant to destroy us, they're meant to wake us up." A few days later, while Daniel and Rebecca talked to the insurance man, I quietly packed a small suitcase. Just a few clothes, my Bible, my old reading glasses, and the photograph of Thomas. When Daniel came into my room and saw the suitcase, his face changed. "Mom, what are you doing?" I smiled gently. "I'm going to stay with Mrs. Henson for a little while. You two need time to rebuild this house and yourselves." He frowned. "You don't have to go. We want you here." I shook my head. "You need peace, Daniel. You've been through enough, and I need to breathe again. Sometimes love means giving space, not holding on." He didn't argue, maybe because deep inside he knew I was right. When I hugged him goodbye, I felt the weight of 40 years resting in that single moment. A mother finally letting her grown child walk his own path, even if it led away from her. Mrs. Henson welcomed me like a sister. She lived alone too, in a small, cozy house filled with the smell of lavender and fresh bread. "You'll stay as long as you need," she said, setting down a tray of tea and buttered toast. "This house has plenty of space, and I could use the company." Her kindness felt like sunlight on cold skin. I hadn't realized how much I'd been shrinking inside my own home. The first few nights were strange. I woke up several times, expecting to hear the sound of Daniel's footsteps or the squeak of Rebecca's kettle. Instead, there was only silence. Soft and peaceful, not lonely. I started helping Mrs. Henson in her garden, trimming the roses and talking to the birds that perched on the fence. We'd sit together in the evenings, knitting, watching the sky turn orange. Sometimes she'd say, "Maggie, you've spent so many years taking care of others. Maybe it's time to take care of yourself now." I'd smile faintly. "I don't even know who that is anymore." "Then find her," she'd reply. "You still have time." Weeks passed, and slowly, something began to change inside me. I started cooking my favorite meals again, not because anyone asked me to, but because I wanted to. I began writing letters to old friends I'd lost touch with. I even joined Mrs. Henson at the local community center on Fridays, where we helped serve tea and cookies to the elderly. For the first time in years, I laughed, truly laughed, without feeling guilty. But deep down, there was still an ache. I missed Daniel. I missed the sound of his voice calling out, "Mom, where's my wallet?" Or the way he used to kiss my forehead before work. I missed Rebecca too, her soft footsteps in the morning, the hum of her favorite song in the kitchen. Even though things had changed, I still loved them. And love, I realized, doesn't vanish just because life becomes difficult. It just waits quietly, hoping for another chance. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after the fire, there was a knock on Mrs. Henson's door. When I opened it, I froze. It was Rebecca. She looked tired, her eyes red and her hair tied in a loose bun. But she smiled, a small, hesitant smile. "Hi, Margaret. Can I come in?" My heart softened immediately. "Of course, dear. Come in." She stepped inside, holding a small basket. "I brought you something. Some muffins. Your favorite, banana and walnut." I smiled, remembering how she used to bake them in the early days of her marriage. "Thank you. They smell lovely." We sat at the small kitchen table. There was a long silence before she spoke again. "Daniel told me you were here. He misses you." "I miss him too," I said quietly. She nodded, looking down at her hands. "He's been better lately. The counselor said the accident might have been a blessing in disguise. It forced us to talk about everything we had been avoiding." I stayed silent, letting her continue. "He also told me something," she said softly, "that he feels guilty, that he hurt you by not protecting you from me." Tears filled her eyes. "Margaret, I didn't realize how lonely you were. I was so busy trying to make a home that I forgot it was already yours." Her words pierced me, but they also healed something deep inside. I reached across the table and held her hand. "Rebecca, we both made mistakes. You were young. I was grieving. We were two women trying to love the same man in different ways. It's all right now." She looked up, eyes glistening. "Do you forgive me?" "I already did," I said with a trembling smile. "The day of the fire, when I saw you alive, forgiveness came without me asking for it." She began to cry quietly, and I held her hand tighter. For a long time, we just sat there, two broken souls finding peace in shared silence. Later that evening, after she left, I sat outside watching the sunset. The sky was painted in pink and gold, like an apology written in light. Mrs. Henson joined me, handing me a cup of tea. She came, didn't she? Yes, we talked. And I smiled softly. And I think we finally saw each other, not as enemies, but as women who've both lost something. She nodded. "That's forgiveness, Maggie. Not forgetting, not pretending, just understanding." A few days later, Daniel came to see me too. He looked healthier, calmer. He hugged me for a long time before saying a word. "Daniel, I'm sorry for everything." "You don't have to apologize, son. We all did what we could." "No," he said firmly. "You did too much. You carried all of us, even when we didn't see it. I want you to know I'm grateful. I'm proud to be your son." Tears slipped down my cheeks. I cupped his face in my hands. "And I'm proud to be your mother." We spent the afternoon talking like old friends about Thomas, about his work, about little things that didn't matter, but somehow felt like everything. When he left, he kissed my forehead and whispered, "Come home soon, Mom. The house doesn't feel right without you." I smiled, but didn't answer, because I wasn't sure if home still meant the same thing to me. That night, I opened my diary and wrote, "Sometimes you have to step away from the place you love to truly see it. I thought my life was over when I left that house, but maybe it was just beginning. Maybe survival isn't about running away, it's about choosing peace over pain. As the weeks turned into months, the house was repaired. Daniel and Rebecca started inviting me over for dinners again. At first, occasionally, then regularly. The laughter returned slowly, like a timid guest unsure if it was welcome. We cooked together, shared stories, and even watched old family movies one evening. At one point, Rebecca turned to me and said, "You know, Margaret, this feels like the home I always wanted." I smiled, glancing at Thomas's old photo on the wall. "It always was, dear. It just needed all of us to see it again." Yet, even with all that healing, something inside me told me my journey wasn't quite over. I had spent my whole life being a wife, a mother, a caretaker. Now I wanted to be me, whoever that was. So one morning, I told Daniel and Rebecca, "I'm thinking of visiting my sister in the countryside for a few months." They looked surprised but supportive. "You deserve it, Mom. You've spent your whole life taking care of us. Go take care of yourself now." Rebecca smiled. "Bring us pictures of the lake, will you?" "I will," I said, laughing softly, "and a few stories, too." When I boarded the train that morning, the sun was rising over the horizon. I looked out the window as the city faded behind me. The rooftops, the trees, the small garden that once held my life. I thought of Mrs. Henson's note, those 8 words that had changed everything. "Get out of here if you want to live." I realized she hadn't been warning me about danger. She had been offering me freedom. And for the first time in decades, I felt alive. The next morning, I woke up to an unusual silence. The house that used to echo with my son's laughter, the clatter of cups and Sarah's footsteps, felt hollow. No one called me for breakfast. No one asked for tea. I walked to the kitchen slowly, my shawl wrapped around me. The sink was full of dirty dishes, the counter cluttered with crumbs. I sighed and began cleaning, old habits by heart. As I washed, I heard them talking in the living room. Sarah's voice was sharp. "She's doing it again, Mark, cleaning, rearranging, everything. I told her not to touch my kitchen." Mark's reply was lower, but I heard it anyway. "She's just trying to help, Sarah. You know how she is." "Help?" she scoffed. "You call that help? She's interfering. She wants to control everything like before." I froze. The water kept running, but my hands went still. For a moment, I wanted to shout back, to remind her that this was once my home, that the kitchen, the stove, the cupboards, all of it were once touched by my hands when she wasn't even part of this house. But I didn't. I simply turned off the tap, dried my hands, and walked quietly back to my room. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my reflection in the small mirror on the wall. When did I become a stranger here? That afternoon, Sarah left for work early. Mark was upstairs in his office, busy on a call. I went to water the plants in the small front yard, the only place that still felt mine. As I stepped outside, I saw Mrs. Lewis, my next-door neighbor, standing near her fence. She smiled, the kind of gentle smile that hides worry. "Morning, Margaret," she said. "You look tired today." I nodded. "Just didn't sleep much." She hesitated, then glanced toward my house. "Everything all right?" I gave her my practiced answer. "Oh, yes, everything's fine." But my voice betrayed me. It trembled, just a little, and I think she noticed. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "If you ever need anything, you know you can come here, day or night." I smiled faintly and nodded again. I didn't know how to tell her that my heart already felt like it had left home long ago. That evening, something unexpected happened. A small argument turned into a storm. Sarah came home looking upset. She threw her purse on the couch and started picking on everything. The placement of the cushions, the smell of the food, even the way I had folded the napkins. Mark tried to calm her down, but his voice was tired. "Sarah, please, Mom didn't mean anything." She snapped. "She's always doing something. I can't live like this." Then she turned to me, her eyes full of years of frustration I never knew existed. "Why can't you just stop interfering? This is my house now. You had your time, Margaret. Let us live our way." Her words hit me like a gust of cold wind. My hand shook. "I didn't mean to interfere," I whispered. "I just wanted to help." Sarah turned away. "Help by leaving things alone." Mark stood between us, helpless. "Enough, both of you." But I could see in his eyes, he didn't know how to choose. A man torn between his mother and his wife, and so he said nothing more. That night, I sat in my room long after everyone went to bed. I looked around at the old photo frames, the soft light of the lamp, the shadows of memories dancing on the wall. It was then I realized I wasn't angry. I was just tired. Tired of being careful with my words. Tired of making myself smaller so others could feel bigger. Tired of pretending that silence was peace. I opened the window and looked out at the streetlight flickering outside. And that's when I saw it. Something small stuck to the window pane. A folded piece of paper. I reached out, curious, and opened it. The handwriting was shaky, but familiar. It was from Mrs. Lewis. It said, "Get out of here if you want to live." For a second, I froze. My heart started beating fast. I looked outside, but she was gone. Only the empty street remained. I sat there, holding that note, my mind spinning. At first, I thought she meant danger, maybe a gas leak or something happening outside. But no, 10 minutes passed and nothing happened. No fire, no sound, no breaking glass, only silence. And that's when I understood. She wasn't talking about death. She was talking about life. She had seen the way I walked, the way I smiled when I didn't mean it, the way my shoulders had begun to sag under the weight of unspoken pain. And she wanted to remind me I was still alive, alive enough to leave, alive enough to choose peace. Tears rolled down my face as I read that line again and again. Get out of here if you want to live. For years, I thought living meant staying. But that night, under the soft hum of the streetlight, I finally understood. Sometimes, leaving is the only way to live. The next morning felt different. The air was still yet heavy, as if the house itself knew something was about to change. I woke up early before sunrise and sat by the window holding that little note from Mrs. Lewis. The ink had smudged a little from my tears. I traced the words with my finger again and again. Get out of here if you want to live. It echoed in my head, soft but steady, like a heartbeat. I walked to the mirror and looked at myself closely, really looked. The wrinkles, the tired eyes, the faint smile I'd been wearing for years. I saw a woman who had given everything she had, love, time, patience, and yet had forgotten to give something to herself. And in that moment, I whispered to my reflection, I want to live. That sentence felt strange on my tongue, like a secret I wasn't supposed to say. But it was the truth. I began to pack quietly. Not everything, just a few clothes, my old photograph album, my wedding ring, and the small Bible my husband had given me before he died. The rest could stay. They were just things. When I was done, I sat on the edge of the bed and waited for the sun to rise. The house was silent, except for the faint creak of the ceiling fan. At 7, I heard footsteps. Mark knocked gently on the door. "Mom, you awake?" "Yes, dear," I said softly. "Come in." He looked surprised when he saw the suitcase. "Are you going somewhere?" I smiled. "Yes, just for a while." His brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" I said, "I think it's time I give you both some space, and maybe give myself some too." He shook his head. "No, Mom, you don't have to." I touched his hand. "It's all right, Mark. This house doesn't need 3 people to feel crowded. You have a life to build, and I have one to rediscover." He looked down, his eyes glistening. "Sarah didn't mean what she said." "I know. But sometimes love means stepping back before it turns into pain." He stood there, silent, then hugged me, tighter than he had in years. "I'm sorry for everything." I smiled through my tears. "Don't be. You've given me enough love to carry for a lifetime. I just forgot how to use it for myself." I walked out of the house quietly. Mrs. Lewis was watering her plants. When she saw me, she smiled. Not surprised, not curious, just proud. I lifted the note in my hand. "You were right," I said. She nodded. "I know." I gave her a small hug. "Thank you." "Go find your life again, Margaret," she said. "It's been waiting for you." I rented a small room above a bakery in the next town, a simple place with a window that opened to the street. At first, the silence was unbearable. There were no footsteps, no clinking dishes, no voices, only my own breathing. But slowly, that silence turned peaceful. I began to walk every morning, just around the park. I learned the names of the shopkeepers, started volunteering at a small community library, and even joined a group of older women who painted landscapes on Sundays. Every night, I would sit by the window, sip my tea, and whisper to the stars, "I'm still here." Months passed. Then one afternoon, I received a letter. It was from Mark. The handwriting was shaky, just like his father's. "Dear Mom, I've been thinking about you every day. The house feels empty without you. Sarah and I have been talking a lot lately about things we said and things we didn't. We both realize we didn't treat you the way you deserved. If you ever feel ready, we'd love for you to come visit. No pressure, no expectations. Just love. Mark." Tears rolled down my cheeks before I even finished reading. For years, I had wanted to hear those words, not because I needed an apology, but because I needed to know he still cared. When I went back a few weeks later, Sarah opened the door. She looked different, tired, but softer somehow. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hello, Sarah," I said, my voice warm. For a moment, we both stood there, unsure what to say. Then she stepped aside. Please, come in. The living room looked the same, but it felt different, lighter. Mark came running down the stairs and hugged me again, just like before. We didn't talk about the past that day. We just had tea together, laughed at old memories, watched the sunset from the porch, and somewhere between those small moments, forgiveness slipped in, gentle, unspoken, but real.
Now, when I look back, I don't see pain anymore. I see lessons. I see growth. I see a woman who learned that love doesn't mean staying silent. It means choosing peace, even when it means walking away. And I've learned something else too. Forgiveness is not a gift you give to others. It's the key you use to unlock your own heart. So when I read that note again sometimes, the one that said, "Get out of here if you want to live," I smile, because I did leave. And for the first time in a very long time, I truly lived.
It's been 2 years now. 2 years since the morning I packed my small suitcase and walked out of the house that once held my whole world. Sometimes I still visit Mark and Sarah. We sit together, talk about ordinary things, the weather, the garden, the neighbor's new dog. It's not perfect, but it's peaceful. Sarah brings me tea with a shy smile now. She even asks for my recipe sometimes, the same one she once said made too much mess. And when I watch her carefully measuring flour or tasting the broth the way I used to, I feel something soft bloom in my chest. Not pride, not victory, just love. Simple, forgiving love. You know, I used to think forgiveness was something you gave after someone said, "I'm sorry." But I've learned that sometimes forgiveness comes long before the apology. It's a quiet decision you make in your heart to stop letting pain take up space where peace could live. And peace? Peace doesn't always arrive with grand gestures or sudden joy. Sometimes it comes slowly, like morning light slipping through the curtains, gently reminding you that you survived the night. I often visit Mrs. Lewis too. She still lives next door, though she moves a little slower now. Sometimes we sit in her garden, surrounded by flowers she insists on watering herself. I once asked her, "Why did you write that note to me?" She smiled that same gentle smile. She said, "I saw the way you were fading, and I didn't want you to disappear before your time." Her words stayed with me, because I think many of us, especially women of my age, we disappear quietly, not because we die, but because we stop feeling seen. We give and give until one day we realize we have nothing left for ourselves. But life has a strange way of waiting for us to wake up.
I started writing a little since I moved. Just small notes, thoughts, memories. Sometimes I write to my younger self. I tell her, "You did your best. You loved with all your heart, and that was enough." Other times, I write to Sarah, though I never send the letters. In those letters, I tell her that I understand now how hard it must have been for her, living with someone who reminded her of everything she couldn't control. That's the thing about love. It often hides behind fear, pride, and misunderstanding. But when you forgive, you begin to see the fear instead of the anger, the hurt instead of the harsh words, and suddenly compassion replaces bitterness. There's one more thing I've learned, something I wish someone had told me years ago. When people push you away, it doesn't always mean they don't love you. Sometimes it means they don't yet know how to love you right. And that's okay. Because love, like people, grows. And sometimes it grows in separate gardens.
Now, every evening, I sit by my window with a cup of tea. I watch the world move. Children playing, couples walking, the bakery lights flickering on across the street. There's a calm in me I never knew before. I no longer feel the need to be needed. I just feel alive. Sometimes I take out that old note from Mrs. Lewis. The edges are soft now, the ink fading, but the message remains strong. Get out of here if you want to live. I smile every time I read it, because I know now. She didn't save me from danger, she reminded me of life. And if I could tell anyone listening to my story one thing, it would be this: don't wait for someone else to write you a note. If your heart whispers that it's time to go, whether from a place, a relationship, or an old version of yourself, listen to it. You don't have to leave with anger. You can leave with grace. You can forgive even as you walk away. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do for others and for yourself is to finally choose peace. So yes, I got out, and now I truly live. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it with someone who needs hope today. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us, even in pain, there's always a path to peace.